My parents handed my sister the keys to a $450,000 property over dinner, beaming with a pride they never showed me. Then they slid a $20 gift card across the table as my consolation prize. They expected me to swallow the insult along with my wine, just like always. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called the bank while chewing my steak. They thought they were generous, but I knew they were frauds. My name is Elena. At 32 years old, I was a senior logistics manager for a major shipping firm in Seattle, owning a condo in Capitol Hill that I paid for with my own sweat and overtime. I was the responsible one, the stable one, the one who never caused a scene. Yet, whenever I crossed the threshold of my parents' house in Oak Creek, a gray and drizzly suburb 40 minutes south of the city, I instantly reverted to being the invisible piece of furniture in the corner. The house always smelled the same, a stifling mixture of potpourri and old dust, a scent that coated the back of my throat and made it hard to breathe. The rain was hammering against the dining room windows that evening, a relentless rhythm that matched the dull headache forming behind my eyes. We were halfway through a dinner of overcooked roast beef and watery mashed potatoes when my father cleared his throat. It was a theatrical sound, the kind he made when he wanted to ensure the spotlight was firmly fixed on him. My mother beamed at him, clutching her wine glass with a white-knuckled grip that suggested excited anticipation. "Girls, we have some news," my father announced, puffing out his chest. "Big news." My sister, Jessica, looked up from her phone. At 34, she was 2 years older than me but possessed the chaotic energy of a teenager who still needed her laundry done for her. She had bounced between 3 careers in 5 years and currently described herself as a freelance life coach. "What is it?" Jessica asked, her voice high and demanding. My mother reached across the table and squeezed Jessica's hand. "We know you've been stressed about your rent going up, honey. We hate seeing you struggle when you have so much potential. So, your father and I made a decision. We bought the Miller property down the street. It's yours. We closed on it this afternoon." The silence that followed was deafening to me, but it was the silence of a bomb detonating. That house was listed for $450,000. I knew the market value because I tracked real estate trends religiously. My parents had just handed my sister nearly $500,000 in equity over a plate of cold roast beef. "Oh my God," Jessica shrieked, jumping up so fast her chair tipped backward. "You guys, are you serious? Oh my God, I can't breathe." She rushed around the table, wrapping her arms around my father's neck, then my mother's. They were a perfect tableau of familial love, a tight circle that physically and metaphorically excluded me. I sat perfectly still, slicing a piece of carrot into microscopic discs. I waited for the acknowledgement, for the explanation, for the balance. Finally, as the hysteria settled and Jessica sat back down, wiping happy tears from her cheeks, my mother turned her gaze to me. "Elena," she said, her voice dropping an octave to a casual, almost afterthought tone. "We didn't forget you. We know you're doing so well on your own, but we wanted to get you a little something too." She slid a small, generic envelope across the tablecloth. It stopped right next to my water glass. I opened it. Inside was a plastic gift card for a coffee chain. On the back, written in black marker, was the amount $20. "Thanks," I said. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. "It's for that place you like near your office," my father added, oblivious to the disparity. "Since you're always working so hard, it was the story of my life compressed into a single moment. When we were kids, Jessica got the brand new designer jeans. I got the generic brand because I didn't care about fashion. When she wrecked her first car, they bought her another one. When I needed textbooks for college, they told me to get a job at the library. They had cultivated a garden where Jessica was the prize rose that needed constant tending, and I was the weed that was expected to survive on rainwater and neglect. The humiliation was a cold, hard stone in my stomach, but I kept my face blank. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. "We're just so happy we could do this." My mother sighed, looking at Jessica, Family supporting family. That is what matters. Totally, Jessica said, beaming. I promise I'll take care of it. It's amazing. My father took a long sip of his red wine. Well, it took some maneuvering. The bank manager, Bob, he's a good guy, helped us structure the leverage so we didn't have to touch the retirement principal immediately. I stopped chewing. Leverage, I asked, my voice calm but sharp. My father waved his hand dismissively. Just finance talk. Elena, don't worry your pretty little head about it. But I did worry. My parents had paid off this house, their primary residence, 5 years ago. They were risk-averse people who hoarded cash. If they were buying a $450,000 property for Jessica, they should have used savings or a standard mortgage. The word leverage combined with the name of the bank on the folder sitting near the centerpiece First Horizon subprime lending sent a chill down my spine. That wasn't a standard lender. That was where people went when they were desperate. I looked at the folder again. Underneath the glossy brochure for the new house, I saw the corner of a pink document. It looked suspiciously like a notice of lien. So, I said, picking up my wine glass and looking my father dead in the eye. Did you buy the house for her, or did you bet the farm on her? My father's laughter was a brittle sound that cracked against the tension in the room. He waved his fork in the air, dismissing my question as if it were a buzzing fly. Bet the farm. Don't be dramatic. Elena, he scoffed, though I noticed his eyes did not meet mine. We simply leveraged the equity in our current home to secure the down payment and co-signed for the remainder. It is standard wealth management. Bob said the equity in this place was just sitting here doing nothing. It was dead money. I set my wine glass down with a precise, soft click. My mind, usually clouded by the emotional fog of seeking their approval, suddenly cleared. It was like a switch had been flipped. The hurt was still there, throbbing dully in my chest, but it was being rapidly overtaken by a cold, analytical dread. So, I started, keeping my voice level. You took a mortgage out on a house you already owned, free and clear. At what rate? Dad, interest rates are hovering around 7% right now. We got a deal. My mother interjected quickly, her smile tight and plastic. A variable rate. It is much lower for the first 2 years. My stomach churned, but not from jealousy this time. It was nausea from the sheer stupidity of it. They were retirees on a fixed income, gambling their paid-off sanctuary on a variable rate loan for a daughter who had never held a job for longer than 18 months. Jessica, oblivious to the financial precipice they were dancing on, chimed in with her mouth full of potatoes. You're just jealous because they trust me with this, she said, pointing her fork at me. Mom and Dad are making a strategic investment. They know I'm going to turn that house into a sanctuary. I'm going to host retreats. It's going to pay for itself in no time. Exactly, my father said, seizing onto her delusion like a lifeline. Jessica has a vision. We are investing in her vision. I looked down at my plate, forcing myself not to scream. I remembered the day I was accepted into the state university. I had asked them for help with the tuition, just a few $1,000s to bridge the gap so I wouldn't have to work full-time while studying engineering. They had sat me down at this very table and told me that struggle builds character. They told me they didn't have the liquidity. So I took out loans. I worked night shifts at a warehouse. I lived in a basement apartment with mold on the ceiling for 3 years. And now, I sat staring at a $20 gift card while they casually discussed leveraging their entire net worth for Jessica's latest whim. It is not just about the money. Elena, my mother said, misinterpreting my silence. It is about faith. We have faith in Jessica. And you didn't have faith in me, I asked. It wasn't a plea. It was a data point I needed to verify. You didn't need it, my father said, shrugging. You were always so hard. You figure things out. Jessica is sensitive. She needs a safety net. A safety net is a savings account. Dad, I replied sharply. A $450,000 property is not a safety net. It is an anchor. Stop it, Jessica snapped, her voice trembling. Why do you always have to ruin everything you think you're so smart with your corporate job and your condo? But you're bitter. You can't stand that they did this for me. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear behind her arrogance. She knew she couldn't afford the property taxes, let alone the maintenance. She needed this bailout to validate her existence. Then, my father muttered something under his breath that froze my blood. Bob said we don't even have to make payments on the principal for 10 years. I stiffened. Interest-only payments. A variable rate. Using their primary residence as collateral. This wasn't just a bad loan. This was predatory. If the market dipped, or if rates spiked after the teaser period, or if they missed a single payment, the bank wouldn't just take Jessica's new house. They would take this house. My parents' house. The logic of the situation clicked into place with terrifying clarity. They hadn't just given her a gift, they had handcuffed themselves to a sinking ship. I looked at the folder again. First Horizon. I knew that bank. They were notorious for aggressive subprime lending practices that targeted seniors with equity-rich but cash-poor profiles. Dad, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. Did you read the amortization schedule? Did you look at the balloon payment terms? I skimmed it, he said defensively. Cutting a large piece of beef. Bob walked us through it. He's a friend from the golf club. I trust him. He trusted a man he played golf with over his daughter who managed logistics for a multi-million-dollar supply chain. The absurdity was almost funny. I realized then that arguing was pointless. They were entrenched in their narrative of being the benevolent saviors. Any pushback from me was just jealousy in their eyes. I needed to stop acting like the hurt daughter and start acting like the professional I was. I needed hard evidence. Okay. I lied, forcing my facial muscles to relax. I'm sorry. I worry about the market. But if Bob said it's solid, then I guess it's solid. My mother exhaled, a long, dramatic sigh of relief. Thank you. Elena, can we please just enjoy this nice dinner now? It's a celebration. Of course, I said. I'm going to use the restroom. Be right back. I stood up, clutching my phone. I wasn't going to the restroom. I had seen the loan number peeking out from the top of the papers in the folder when my father opened it earlier. I had a photographic memory for numbers. It was part of my job. As I walked down the hallway, the familiar creak of the floorboards beneath my feet sounded different. It didn't sound like home anymore. It sounded like collateral. I wasn't angry anymore. I was cold. I was calculating. And I was about to blow their delusion wide open. I slid back into my chair, the velvet seat cushion feeling less like a comfort and more like a trap. The dinner conversation had moved on from the initial announcement to the finer details of Jessica's future interior design choices, but the air around me felt thick, pressurized by the secrets sitting inside that manila folder. My roast beef had congealed into a cold, gray lump on my plate, a perfect reflection of how I felt about this entire charade. We just want you girls to be happy, my mother said, her eyes glistening with the wine she had been steadily consuming. That is the only job a parent has. To provide, to protect. Family is everything. It is the only thing that lasts. I gripped my fork until my knuckles turned white. Family is everything. It was a beautiful slogan, plastered on wooden signs in hobby stores, but in this house, it was a conditional statement. Family was everything when Jessica needed a bailout. Family was a burden when I needed a cosigner for my first apartment, a request they had denied because they did not want to expose their credit score to unnecessary variables. I had slept in my car for 2 weeks between leases that year. Exactly. Mom, Jessica said, swirling her wine. I feel so supported right now. It's like the universe is finally aligning for me. Well, you deserve it, Princess, my father said, leaning back and patting his stomach. And don't you worry about the bank. Bob said the beauty of this new product is the flexibility. We didn't even have to show the updated pension statements. It is a stated income loan. Very streamlined. My head snapped up. Stated income, I asked, my voice cutting through the warm chatter like a blade. My father blinked, realizing he might have said too much, but his arrogance quickly covered the slip. It means they trust our reputation. Elena, we have been with that bank for 30 years. Bob knows we're good for it. He put us down for the income bracket we need to qualify for the teaser rate. It is just paperwork. My heart stopped, then hammered against my ribs with a violent, rhythmic thud. Stated income loans were practically extinct after the housing crash unless you were dealing with predatory lenders or committing fraud. If they had inflated their income on the application to secure a loan they could not actually afford, and if the bank found out, the loan could be called immediately. They were not just risking the house, they were risking legal action. They were standing on a trapdoor and handing Jessica the lever. "Dad," I said, trying one last time to appeal to reason, though I knew it was futile. If the income on the application doesn't match your tax returns, that is serious. That is fraud. Oh, stop it. Jessica slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. You are just trying to scare them. You can't stand it. You can't stand that I'm getting something nice. You're a jealous, toxic person. Elena. She's right. Elena, my mother added, her voice icy and disappointed. Why must you always be so negative? Bob knows what he is doing. We are helping your sister. Why can't you just be happy for her? The pain that had been simmering in my gut evaporated. In its place, a cold, hard resolve settled over me. It was a chemical shift, precise and irreversible. I looked at them, my sister, smug and entitled, my parents, reckless and dismissive. They had not just chosen her over me, they had chosen a lie over reality. They were willing to destroy their own financial future to prop up her fantasy, and they were calling me the villain for pointing out the cliff edge. I was done protecting them. I was done being the negative one who quietly fixed their mistakes in the background. If they wanted to play with fire, I would not be the one holding the hose. I would be the wind. My hand moved to the pocket of my blazer. The hard, rectangular shape of my smartphone felt heavy, like a loaded gun. I knew the number for First Horizon. I had seen it on the folder, and I had a contact there from my own network, a compliance officer named Sarah who I had met at a logistics conference. But I didn't need Sarah. I just needed the automated system or a night shift representative to verify a single data point. I pulled the phone out. "What are you doing?" my father asked, his brow furrowing. "Put that away. We are having a family dinner. I just want to check something," I said, my thumb hovering over the screen. "You said Bob handled everything, right, and the income was," stated Elena. "Put the phone down," my mother warned, her voice rising. "I'm just going to call the verification line," I said, unlocking the screen. "If everything is as legal and safe as you say, there is nothing to worry about. Bob is a professional." "Right. So the bank's records will match your actual pension." "Don't you dare," my father growled, his face flushing a deep red. "I forbid you." I looked him in the eye. I was not the little girl who begged for tuition money anymore. I was a woman who managed millions of dollars in assets every day. "Let's just see," I said. And I pressed the call button, placing the phone flat on the table between the centerpiece and the gravy boat. I hit the speaker icon. The dial tone purred through the silent room, loud and terrifying. The electronic ringtone chirped 3 times, a sharp, rhythmic sound that sliced through the heavy silence of the dining room. My father sat with his mouth slightly open, a forkful of roast beef hovering halfway to his lips. My mother looked like a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming semi-truck. Jessica just looked confused, her eyes darting between the phone and my face. "Thank you for calling First Horizon's Platinum Service Line," a cheerful female voice boomed through the speaker. "This is Brenda. Am I speaking with Mr. Robert Vance?" I leaned forward, my voice steady and authoritative. I am calling on his behalf. Brenda. He is sitting right here. We are reviewing the closing documents for the new loan, number 78942. We need to clarify the collateral terms before we file the paperwork. Elena, my father barked, dropping his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. Hang up that phone right now. This is private business. I held up a hand to silence him, my eyes never leaving the device. Go ahead. Brenda, I said. Just to confirm for the record, the property located at 1210 Maple Drive is the primary security for this loan. Correct one moment, Brenda said. The sound of typing filled the room, amplified by the speaker. It sounded like gunfire. Yes, that is correct. The loan is a home equity line of credit secured by the primary residence at 1210 Maple Drive. The full amount of $450,000 has been disbursed to the title company for the purchase of the property at 44 Oak Lane. The blood drained from my mother's face. Jessica frowned, tilting her head. Wait, Jessica said, her voice small. I thought the house was mine and the title for the Oak Lane property. I asked, ignoring my sister. Whose name is on the deed? Brenda. The deed is recorded in the name of Jessica Vance. Brenda replied cheerfully. Free and clear of encumbrances, as the purchase was made with cash funds from the credit line. The room seemed to tilt. The reality of what they had done was worse than I had calculated. They hadn't just co-signed a mortgage. They had literally mortgaged their own home, the home they had worked 30 years to pay off to buy Jessica a house with cash. If Jessica decided to walk away, or if the market crashed, or if she simply couldn't pay the property taxes, the bank wouldn't take her house. They would take my parents' house. Jessica had a free asset. My parents had a $450,000 liability hanging over their retirement. You put the debt on your house. I asked, looking at my father. Elena, that is enough. My mother shrieked, reaching for the phone. Brenda, hang up, hang up. I slid the phone out of her reach, my gaze turning icy. One last question. Brenda, I said, my voice cutting through my mother's panic. The application lists the borrower's annual income as $180,000. Can you confirm that figure was verified via tax returns? Let me see. Brenda hummed. No, ma'am. This is a stated income product. The income was self-reported by the borrower. No tax verification was required for this tier. My father's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. He slammed his fist on the table, making the wine glasses jump. I said hang up, he roared. Thank you, Brenda, I said calmly. That will be all. I tapped the red button to end the call. The silence that rushed back into the room was heavy, suffocating, and violent. I looked at the three of them. Jessica was slowly realizing that her gift was actually a bomb strapped to our parents' chest. My parents were looking at me with a mixture of terror and unbridled fury. They were exposed. The veneer of the wise, benevolent patriarch and matriarch had been stripped away, revealing two desperate people who had committed mortgage fraud to enable their favorite child. You, my father hissed, his voice trembling with rage. You have no right. You have absolutely no right to interfere in my finances. I am the head of this family. You committed fraud, Dad, I said, picking up my wine glass and taking a slow sip. You told the bank you make $180,000 a year. Your pension is $65,000. If the bank audits that loan, or if you miss a single payment and they look closer, you go to federal prison, and you lose this house. I did it for your sister, he shouted, spit flying from his lips, because she needs us unlike you, who only cares about ruining this family. I didn't ruin anything, I replied, setting the glass down. I just turned on the lights. You have humiliated us, my father shouted, his voice cracking under the strain of his anger. He stood up and threw his linen napkin onto the table, knocking over the salt shaker. In my own house, You call a stranger and discuss our private affairs on speakerphone. Who do you think you are?" My mother was weeping now, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with a theatrical display of victimhood. "We invited you here for a nice dinner," she sobbed. "We just wanted everyone to be together. Why do you always have to be so difficult?" I looked at them, feeling a detachment so profound it scared me. They were not worried about the fraud. They were not worried about the financial ruin looming over them. They were worried about the loss of face. They were angry that I had broken the script where they played the generous benefactors, and I played the grateful, silent audience. Jessica was no longer gloating. She looked between our parents and me, her face pale. The reality that her new home was actually a precarious house of cards built on our parents' lies was starting to sink in. "Mom!" Jessica's voice was small, stripped of its earlier arrogance. "Is it true? Could they take the house away?" "My house? Nobody is taking anything," my father snapped at her, though he refused to look her in the eye. "Your sister is just trying to cause trouble because she is jealous. She has always been jealous of you." "Jealous?" I laughed, a harsh sound that had no humor in it. "I am not jealous, Dad. I am exhausted. Do you want to talk about the numbers? Because I love numbers. You just leveraged $450,000 of equity for Jessica. In the last 10 years, you have paid for her car, her rent in 3 different cities, her credit card debt, and her life coaching certification. That totals easily over $100,000. I picked up the $20 gift card from the tablecloth and held it up. "And I get this," I said, "and a lecture about how proud you are of my independence." "Because you are independent," my mother cried, looking up with tear-streaked eyes. "You have a good job, Elena. You have your own condo. You never asked us for help. Jessica needs us more. She is not as hard as you. The world is tougher for her." "I am hard because you forced me to be," I shot back, my voice rising for the first time. "I didn't ask for help because the one time I did. You told me the bank was closed. Remember when I got accepted to grad school, I asked for $5,000, just a loan. You said you didn't have the liquidity." "We didn't," my father insisted. "You did," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "I know you did. Because 2 weeks later, you took Jessica to Italy for a month to help her find herself after her boyfriend broke up with her. That trip cost $12,000. That was necessary for her mental health," my mother protested, "and my education was what a luxury I asked." The room fell silent. My father poured himself more wine, his hand shaking so badly that drops of red splashed onto the white tablecloth like blood. "It is not just about the money," I said, leaning forward. "It is about the lie. You keep saying you treat us equally, but the math proves you don't. And speaking of math, let's talk about the custodial account Grandma opened for me when I was born." My father froze. My mother stopped crying instantly. The air in the room became so thin I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. "I went to the bank last week to finally close out that old account," I said, watching their faces closely. "I wanted to use it to pay down my own mortgage. Grandma put $10,000 in there in 1992. With compound interest, it should have been substantial. But the balance was 0. Jessica looked at our parents. "What account?" "The teller told me it was drained 6 years ago," I continued, my eyes locking onto my father's. "Who signed the withdrawal slip? Dad." My father looked at his plate. He looked at the wall. He looked anywhere but at me. "We had an emergency," he muttered. "What emergency?" I demanded. "I didn't have an emergency. That was in my name, with you as the custodian. What emergency required you to steal my inheritance?" "It wasn't stealing," my mother shrieked. "We are a family. We share resources." "It was for Jessica's legal fees," my father blurted out, slamming his hand on the table. "When she got that DUI." We had to keep it off her record. We had to hire the best lawyer. We didn't have the cash on hand. We intended to pay it back. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I remembered that year. Jessica had told everyone she was taking a sabbatical to write a book. In reality, she was fighting a drunk driving charge, and my parents had raided my college fund to pay for her defense lawyer. They had stolen from the child who followed the rules to save the child who broke them. So, I said, my voice trembling slightly, you stole my money to fix her mistake. And you never paid it back. And today, you mortgaged your future to give her a mansion. We did what we had to do, my father said, his voice sullen and defensive. You were doing fine. You didn't need the money. Jessica was in trouble. I looked at them, really looked at them, and realized the truth. It wasn't that they loved her more. It was that they viewed me as a resource and her as a pet. I was the insurance policy. She was the project. I was never a priority. I was simply the one they didn't have to worry about, so they stopped caring entirely. I see, I said softly. The silence that followed was heavy and final. The dinner was over. The relationship, I realized with a sudden, sharp clarity, was over too. I pushed my chair back from the table. The wooden legs scraped against the floor with a harsh, vibrating screech that made my mother flinch. I did not storm out. I did not run to my car. Instead, I walked calmly into the kitchen and turned on the tap. The cold water ran over my wrists, shocking my system back into focus. Standing there, staring at the dark window above the sink, the last 15 years of my life replayed in my mind not as a tragedy, but as a resume. I thought about the double shifts I worked at the logistics warehouse to pay for my textbooks. I remembered the nights I slept on a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment that had no heat, wearing 3 sweaters because I refused to ask them for a loan. I thought about every promotion I earned, every raise I negotiated, every dollar I invested. I had built a fortress of stability around myself, brick by painful brick. For years, I had viewed my independence as a scar, a sign that I was not lovable enough to be cared for. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass and realized I had been wrong. My independence was not a punishment. It was a weapon. They had crippled Jessica with their coddling, turning her into a perpetual child who needed a $450,000 pacifier to feel secure. They had tried to break me with neglect, but they had only made me unbreakable. I dried my hands on a dish towel. The trembling in my fingers had stopped. The ache in my chest was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. I was done waiting for an apology that would never come. I was done auditing their affection to see if I finally had a positive balance. I was the one with the assets. I was the one with the leverage, and I was about to close the account. I walked back into the dining room. The 3 of them were huddled together, whispering. They stopped abruptly when I entered. They looked at me with wary eyes, expecting the daughter who usually smoothed things over, the one who would apologize for raising her voice and offer to pay for dessert. I stood behind my chair, gripping the back of it like a podium. I want to make sure we understand the new terms of our relationship, I said. My voice was low, steady, and devoid of any warmth. Elena, please. My mother sniffed, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Don't be dramatic. We can discuss the money later. We are a family. No, I said. We are a financial ecosystem, and I am withdrawing my participation. My father looked up, his face still flushed. What are you talking about? I am talking about the fact that you viewed my savings as a slush fund for Jessica's mistakes. I replied. I am talking about the fact that you have leveraged your only asset to the brink of insolvency. You are assuming that if this goes wrong, if rates go up, if Jessica fails, someone will step in to save you. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. I need you to know, I continued, enunciating every word, that I am not your safety net. I am not your retirement plan. I am not your emergency fund. If that loan is called, do not call me. If you lose this house, do not ask to move into my condo. If you need money for food or medicine because you are paying off a predatory loan, do not look in my direction. Jessica's jaw dropped. You can't be serious. They're mom and dad. You would let them starve. They made a choice, I said, looking at my sister. They chose to bet their survival on your success. That is the gamble. I am just clarifying the stakes. My father's arrogance finally cracked. For the first time all night, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He realized that the competent, successful daughter he had marginalized was the only thing standing between him and destitute old age. He had always assumed I would be there to clean up the mess because I was the good one. Elena, he stammered, his voice losing its boom. You are being cruel. We are your parents, and I am the child you stole from. I said, I will be contacting my lawyer tomorrow to formally remove myself from any power of attorney or healthcare proxy arrangements. I do not want to be legally responsible for the wreckage you are about to create. The shift in the room was palpable. The air was sucked out of their lungs. They were no longer the parents scolding a petulant child. They were elderly people realizing they had burned the only bridge that could hold their weight. I watched them shrink in their seats, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely, terrifyingly free. I work in logistics, I said, my voice maintaining that unnatural, glassy calm. My entire career is built on anticipating failure points and creating redundancies. Did you really think I hadn't noticed the way you looked at my paycheck whenever I visited, or the way you asked probing questions about my bonuses? My mother dabbed her eyes, but her hands were shaking. She knew exactly what I was talking about. For years, they had treated my financial success not as a point of pride, but as a communal resource they hadn't tapped into yet. Last Tuesday, I had a meeting with my estate planner. I continued. I updated the beneficiary designations on my life insurance policy, my 401k, and my investment accounts. Previously, in the event of my death, everything would have gone to you two, with a trust provision for Jessica. And now my father asked, his voice barely a whisper. The color had drained from his face, leaving him looking old and frail. Now, I said, it goes to a scholarship fund for underprivileged engineering students and my assets. They are in a revocable living trust. You are not the trustees. You are not the beneficiaries. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, you don't get a dime. If you default on this loan, my estate will not be there to bail you out. You cut us out, Jessica gasped. But what if I need help? This house is huge. The realtor said the utilities alone are $400 a month, and the property taxes. Dad said you would help me figure out the taxes I turned to my sister. The entitlement in her voice was starting to crack, revealing the panic underneath. She was finally doing the math I had done instantly when I walked in. The property tax rate in this county is roughly 1.1%, I told her, reciting the numbers like I was reading a weather report. On a $450,000 assessment, that is nearly $5,000 a year. That is over $400 a month. Just for the privilege of owning the building. Add insurance, utilities, and maintenance. You are looking at $1,500 a month before you even buy groceries. Do you have $1,500 a month of disposable income? Jessica, no, she whispered, tears spilling over. I thought Mom and Dad were handling the overhead. We were going to help, my father croaked, looking at his hands. But if the rate adjusts, if the payment goes up, and it will go up, I interrupted. That is how subprime loans work. You have a 2-year teaser rate. In 24 months, your payment could double. And since you have no liquidity because you gave it all to the bank, and you have no backup because I am walking away, you are statistically likely to lose both homes. My mother let out a sharp, wounded sound, like an animal caught in a trap. Elena, you can't let that happen. We are your parents. We raised you, and you sold me out. I said simply, I am not punishing you. I am protecting myself. You chose to tie your boat to a sinking ship. I am just cutting the rope so I don't go down with you. I picked up my purse from the floor. The weight of it felt good in my hand. It contained my keys, my wallet, and my freedom. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to throw wine in their faces. The numbers were the most brutal weapon in the room, and they had inflicted a wound that would never heal. I think I will skip dessert, I said. My father opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to yell, perhaps to beg, but he closed it again. He looked at the papers on the table, the fraudulent loan application, the deed, the gift card worth $20. He looked at Jessica, who was now sobbing silently into her napkin. Then he looked at me, and he saw a stranger. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating, the sound of a family myth disintegrating in real time. I didn't wait for a dismissal. I turned my back on the table, on the cold roast beef, and on the people who had taught me that love was a transaction I couldn't afford. I walked toward the front door, and the only sound was the click of my heels on the hardwood floor, steady and final. The fallout from that dinner did not stay contained within the walls of my parents' house. Like a cracked pipe leaking sewage into the foundation, the toxicity seeped out and began to poison the surrounding landscape of our extended family. For the first 48 hours, my phone was a paperweight vibrating with silent notifications. I had silenced calls from my parents, but they soon recruited the auxiliary troops. It started with my Aunt Linda, my mother's older sister, who called me at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday. Elena, she said, her voice dripping with that specific brand of disappointment that older relatives weaponize so well. Your mother hasn't stopped crying for 2 days. She says you threatened them. She says you are abandoning the family over money. I didn't threaten anyone. Aunt Linda, I said, cradling my coffee cup in my quiet, paid-off kitchen. I just stated facts, and it isn't about money. It is about fraud. Fraud. Linda scoffed. Oh, honestly, your father is a good man. He is just trying to help your sister. You know how fragile Jessica is. He forged income documents to get a loan he can't afford, I replied, keeping my voice flat. And he admitted to stealing the $10,000 Grandma left for me to pay for Jessica's drunk driving lawyer. Did he tell you that part? The line went dead silent. The moral high ground Aunt Linda had been standing on suddenly crumbled. He did what she stammered. Ask him, I said. Ask him about the custodial account. And then ask yourself if you want to lend him money when the bank comes calling in 6 months. I hung up. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The flying monkey's cousins, second aunts, family friends who had been dispatched to guilt-trip me into submission started to retreat. The rumor mill in our small town worked fast. Once the truth about the stolen inheritance and the reckless mortgage got out, the sympathy my parents expected to harvest turned into judgment. They had always been proud people, desperate to maintain the appearance of a perfect upper-middle-class life. Now, they were the cautionary tale. Meanwhile, Jessica was crashing hard into the wall of reality. She called me 3 weeks after the dinner. I let it go to voicemail, but I listened to the message. Elena! She sobbed into the receiver, the sound distorted and tinny. The heating bill. It's $400. The windows are drafty. I can't. I don't have that kind of cash until my next client pays. Mom said they're tight right now. Please. Just this once I deleted the message. It wasn't cruelty. It was consistency. If I paid that bill, I would be paying every bill for the next 30 years. She was sitting in a $450,000 asset. She could figure out how to buy a sweater. While their world descended into chaos, mine became sharper and more efficient. I threw myself into my work at Stratus Logistics, a private supply chain management firm in downtown Seattle. The office was a sanctuary of logic and order. Here, numbers didn't lie, and performance was rewarded with equity, not empty promises. My boss, a stern but fair woman named Karen, called me into her office a month after the incident. "Your analysis on the Pacific shipping routes saved us $2 million this quarter," Karen said, tapping a stylus against her tablet. "You are the most focused person on this floor. Elena, I don't know what is going on in your personal life, but it's working for you. We are promoting you to regional director. The base salary is $160,000. I sat there, stunned. In 1 month, I had earned a raise that nearly equaled the phantom income my father had lied about to the bank. "Thank you," I said, and for the first time in years, I felt a smile reach my eyes. I accept. The contrast was jarring. My parents were drowning in a self-made swamp of debt and deceit, desperately paddling to keep their heads above water while maintaining the facade of the benevolent patriarch and matriarch. I was ascending, unburdened by the weight of their expectations. I used to carry a heavy, stone-like guilt in my chest every time I succeeded where Jessica failed. I used to apologize for my stability, but as I walked out of that office building, watching the rain wash over the gray city streets, I realized the guilt was gone. It had been replaced by a profound sense of relief. I wasn't their parent. I wasn't their banker. I was just Elena, and for the first time, that was enough. I checked my phone. 1 missed call from my father. I didn't even feel the urge to check the voicemail. I just put the phone in my pocket and walked toward the subway, breathing in the cold, clean air of my own life. The weeks that followed were defined not by noise, but by a profound, hollow silence. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to solve the puzzle of my family. I sat on the balcony of my condo, watching the gray clouds roll over the Space Needle, and I finally allowed myself to grieve. I wasn't grieving the loss of my parents, because I realized I never really had them. I was grieving the fantasy. I was mourning the imaginary versions of them I had carried in my head, the parents who would eventually see my worth, who would one day apologize, who would finally be fair. That hope is a dangerous thing. It keeps you tethered to people who hurt you. Letting it die was painful, like pulling a jagged piece of glass out of a wound. But once it was gone, the healing could actually begin. I realized that their favoritism wasn't a verdict on my value. It was a symptom of their dysfunction. They needed Jessica to be helpless so they could feel needed, and they needed me to be strong so they could ignore me. I was the utility bill they paid automatically. She was the slot machine they couldn't stop feeding. 3 months after the dinner, Jessica asked to meet. She chose a cheap diner halfway between my office and her new money pit of a house. When I walked in, she looked 10 years older. The glow of the homeowner victory lap had faded, replaced by the pallor of sleepless nights. "I don't know what to do," Jessica said, staring into her black coffee. "The furnace made a noise yesterday. A loud banging. I called a guy, and he said it needs to be replaced. He quoted me. He said it would be $6,000. She looked up at me, her eyes rimmed with red, waiting for me to reach for my checkbook. It was a muscle memory for her. "That sounds about right for a house of that age," I said, taking a sip of my tea. "Did you get a second quote?" "A second quote," she snapped, her voice cracking. "I don't have money for a first quote. Mom and Dad said they would help. But Dad is acting weird. He says they are liquidating some assets. But he won't tell me what. I think they're selling the boat." I felt a twinge of pity, but it was distant, like watching a character in a movie make a bad decision. "They probably are," I said calmly. "They have a massive debt service to cover now. The boat is a luxury they can no longer afford." "This isn't fair," Jessica whispered, leaning across the sticky table. "I didn't ask for this. They gave it to me. And now it's ruining everything. Why won't you help us?" You have so much. You're sitting there in your designer coat, judging us. Why are you so cold? I am not cold. Jessica, I said softly. I am just clear. For 30 years, I tried to buy my way into this family with good grades, with compliance, with silence. It didn't work. Giving you $6,000 for a furnace won't fix the hole in the roof, and it won't fix the hole in this family. So you're just going to watch us drown? She asked, a tear sliding down her nose. I am going to watch you swim, I corrected. Or not. But I am staying on the shore. I left a $20 bill on the table for the coffee, ironically, the exact amount of the gift card they had given me, and walked out. I didn't feel the old surge of anger. I didn't feel the urge to scream at her entitlement. I just felt a quiet finality. I knew what was coming. The 90-day mark was approaching. In the world of subprime lending and stated income loans, that is usually when the internal audits happen, or when the teaser rates have their first adjustment review. My father had built a castle on a foundation of sand and lies, and the tide was coming in. I went back to my quiet, paid-off apartment and waited. I didn't have to do anything else. The math was already doing the work for me. The phone would ring soon, and this time, I wouldn't be the one calling the bank. The bank would be calling them, and I was ready to let the call go to voicemail. The certified letter from First Horizon sat on the mahogany coffee table like a death sentence. It had arrived that morning, shattering the fragile denial my parents had been living in for the past 90 days. My father was slumped on the sofa, his head in his hands, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. My mother was pacing the room, twisting a handkerchief until it was just a tight, white knot. Jessica sat in the armchair, staring at the floor, her face swollen from crying. I stood by the fireplace, keeping my coat on. I was not staying. They are calling the loan, my father said, his voice a hoarse whisper. They audited the application. They flagged the income discrepancy. They want the full balance of $450,000 immediately, or they will initiate foreclosure proceedings on this house. He looked up at me, his eyes red and desperate. They said it is fraud. Elena, they said we could face legal action if we don't settle it. I warned you. I said, my voice was not smug. It was not angry. It was just a statement of fact, as neutral as gravity. I told you that a stated income loan on a fixed pension was a ticking time bomb. You lit the fuse because you wanted to play the hero for Jessica. We can't lose this house, my mother pleaded, stopping her pacing to grab my arm. We have lived here for 30 years. This is our home. Elena, please. You have the liquidity. You have the assets. If you just co-sign a new loan, or lend us the bridge money, we can fix this. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. It was the same hand that had signed the withdrawal slip for my college fund to pay for a lawyer. It was the hand that had waved away my concerns for years. I gently but firmly removed her grip. No, I said. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Elena Jessica cried out, looking up with a fresh wave of panic. You can't do this. If they lose this house, I lose my house, I'll be homeless. How can you be so heartless? I am not being heartless. Jessica, I replied, looking her in the eye. I am being an adult, and for the first time, you are going to have to be one too. You wanted the house. Now you have the mortgage. If you can't pay it, sell it. We can't sell it for what we owe. My father groaned. The market has cooled. We would be underwater. We would still owe $50,000. Then you will have to sell the boat, I said, and the second car, and downsize to a condo. That is how math works. My father straightened up, looking at me with a strange expression. It wasn't anger anymore. It was shock. For decades, he had viewed me as the quiet, obedient afterthought. Now, he was looking at a woman who held all the power, a woman who had built a fortress of security while he was building a house of cards. In his eyes, I saw a flicker of something that looked like respect. It was terrified, reluctant respect, but it was there. He finally realized that I was the strong one. "You really aren't going to help us," he said. It wasn't a question. "I already helped myself," I said. "I broke the cycle. I am not going to pay for the privilege of being your second choice." I turned toward the door. The house smelled of old dust and new fear. It was the smell of consequences finally coming home to roost. "Elena," my mother whispered, "if you walk out that door—" "I know," I interrupted her. "If I walk out, I am free." I opened the heavy oak door. The cool evening air rushed in, smelling of rain and wet pavement. I didn't look back at the three people frozen in their living room, trapped in a tragedy of their own making. I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind me with a soft, decisive click. I walked down the driveway to my car. I didn't feel happy. Exactly. Happiness is a fleeting emotion. What I felt was lighter. I felt the immense weight of their expectations, their debts, and their dysfunction slide off my shoulders and dissolve into the damp air. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away. I didn't check the rearview mirror. I knew what was behind me. I was only interested in the road ahead. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are all tuning in from today, so please drop a comment down below with your city or country, and let's get a conversation going about family boundaries. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, please make sure to subscribe to Victoria Revenge Stories, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong, everyone.